Hi there, I'm Des.
And I'm Tim, and together Des and I head up the men's ministry Momentum Australia.
Momentum has multiple functions, but primarily our aim is to help men to succeed in life, to do life better.
We run a weekly radio show that goes all around Australia where we talk about anything and everything that relates to men.
And we encourage men to do life in community, to do life with other men where we can be accountable, we can be welcomed, we can be open and honest about what's happening in our world.
We'd love you to have a look around our website. That's momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find a bunch of resources to help you on your journey and all of our previous episodes and topics.
We thank you for your interest in Momentum Australia, and we hope you enjoyed this video today.
Well, welcome to this week's Momentum. Once again, it is, of course, Tim and Des with you. And hey, thanks so much for tuning in and spending some time with us wherever you are around Australia. And look, if you're listening to the podcast, wherever you might be around the world, it's great that you found us at Momentum Australia. And of course, our website, momentumaustralia.org. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about who we are and what we do, you can check out the website, momentumaustralia.org. Of course, this is never really a solo gig. I've always got my co-host and partner and good friend Des Kennedy with me. How are you this week, my friend?
Yeah, good. That's good. Looking forward to this show. And just while I've got the mic, guys, don't forget, if you're doing life on your own and you need a safe and a confidential conversation, or even if you're with family but you want to have a conversation that you don't want your family to be part of, reach out to our care line, Momentum Care Line, 1-800-000-MEN. That's 1-800-000-636. It operates from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week, to 11 p.m. 5 days a week. And also don't forget our new YouTube channel. So if you want to see us as well as hear us, go onto our YouTube channel, which is YouTube, search for @momentum_4 FOR_men. And you'll see we've got about 9 or so videos up there already. Lots of good feedback, and give us your feedback. And don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share. The channel will continue to grow, which is just amazing.
Yeah. Look, absolutely. And the idea behind Momentum is simply for you guys listening to get connected, do life not in isolation, but together. And also there's a bunch of resources on our website, which will just help you on your journey. And, that's what we're here for, is to help men just improve in every area of your life. We realize we're all on a journey and at different points in that. But check out the website, momentumaustralia.org, with a podcast, and you can have listened to some previous shows, and hopefully that will help you out. Today we've got a very special guest. And after years of hearing men in his business complain and grumble about their lives, realizing they had nowhere to turn for help, our guest this week poured his heart out in prayer and felt led to start up a ministry designed especially to help men.
This ministry now reaches thousands of men in the US, equipping them in key areas of their lives, always being part of a small group, or as they call it, a fire team, to create a safe place, a place of accountability, and a place to be encouraged as you journey through life.
His passion is leading men into biblical manhood, and he is convinced that the most critical need of the church today is men, bold men willing to lead their homes and serve the church.
So we have joining us from a place called Bowling Green, Kentucky. I love saying that. It's amazing, in the US, is the founder and leader of REUP Men's Ministry, Tim Brown. Welcome to Momentum.
Man, thank you. I am so excited about this. I've looked forward to it for some time. You guys and I, we've been hanging out behind the scenes for a few months, and I've gotten to know you guys, and it's just been a neat journey, and I'm really looking forward. If people across the country and Australia can put up with my West Kentucky twang and my voice compared to you Australians, and y'all talk so cool, so I'm hoping they can put up with me tonight.
Well, don't forget, you're talking to an Irishman and an Englishman.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
officially
Well,
only,
it's
but
good to have you.
there's an English and an Irish and an American accent in the conversation. Go figure.
There we go.
Just quickly, Tim, like for people who've never been to Bowling Green, is it one big patch of green in the middle of the country? Yeah.
No,
So,
of course, Kentucky is known as the bluegrass state, and that mainly comes because of the horse business. In Kentucky, horse racing, the Kentucky Derby, Keeneland, which is located in Lexington, Kentucky, racetrack. Those are big deals here, and so we're known as the bluegrass state. And so it's been our home for most of our lives, my wife and I, and we love it here. We raised our boys here in Kentucky, and yeah, it's just a neat place. I would encourage any folks, if you're ever over in the States and looking for a neat place to hang out and beautiful place, to come to Kentucky. And Bowling Green is a smaller community, about 150,000. And if you're familiar with the Corvette car,
Yeah.
Bowling Green is the only place in the world that it's made. It's actually made here in General Motors Company and Corporation. And so this is where it's made. This is the only place they're made. So if you've ever gotten one or you own one, no matter where you live in the world, it was made here. So
Wow, that's cool. Very cool.
Good claim to fame. It's not bad at all.
So let's launch in and I suppose give our listener, because as you said, we've connected behind the scenes, so we've got a bit of familiarity happening. But for people who are hearing you for the first time, I kind of said in the intro, you were running a business and you were hearing these men in your business kind of complain and grumble about certain things in their life, but not really having anywhere to go or any place to go and kind of work through that. So tell us then a bit about that journey for you when you're in that space, how that started bothering you, and the journey from there to then where you are now, which is launched REUP, and this is how we've connected.
Yeah. Well, I say this all the time. First off, I'm the most unlikely guy that the Lord would use for anything. And so in the midst of my career, my vocation, some 20 something years ago is kind of when all this started to happen. I was in the men's clothing, custom clothing business for almost 30 years. And what that really looked like was I would go call on guys in their office or their home where they didn't have to go shop. Most men didn't like to shop. They didn't have time to shop. So I would go to them and sell them custom made suits, sport coats, trousers, shirts, whatever, their business attire, their professional attire. And in the midst of that, I would build relationships with these guys. I would get to know them. We would be behind closed doors and talk and so forth. And a lot of these men were, Tim, I guess you would be described as kind of the movers and shakers of their local communities. They were the men that had the influence. They had platforms. A lot of them were professional men. A lot of them owned their own companies. They were men that young men looked up to and wanted to be like, on the surface. But what was interesting was as I started to develop these relationships with these men, I'd maybe have an hour set for my appointment with them, and they would be gracious enough to give me that time. But we'd only spend about 10 or 15 minutes on clothing, and the rest of the time we were in these conversations. And I started to really see a common thread in these conversations, because these men who other men wanted to be like were some of the most unfulfilled, unhappy, really kind of miserable men that I'd ever been around. They would share just a lot of personal stuff with me. I don't know why. Apparently I had a sign on my forehead that said, "Tell me all your problems." And they did. I don't know that, I've had people tell me, "Well, you just create this setting where people feel like they can trust you." I don't know. But so they would tell me all this stuff, like, "Well, my marriage is awful. My wife and I don't have any kind of relationship. We just exist around each other. My kids don't like me. I don't have any friends. My employees don't like me. But I've got all the stuff. I've got all the toys, got all the material things. I live in the right neighborhood," but they were miserable.
Yeah.
And, so I just kept hearing that more and more. And it just so happened that early on, that was when a man was pouring into my life pretty heavily. I'd call it discipling me. And the main thing he was really teaching me was my identity in Christ, because what had happened to me was I had gotten my identity as a man from the world. And he was helping me understand that my real identity comes from Christ. So as I was learning that and I was listening to these men, I'm like, well, they've got the same problem I did. And what it was they didn't know who they were. And they believed, and this is a statement that when I learned it from a scriptural basis, it totally changed my life when the Lord revealed it through me through his word. But what most of these men believed was that what they did, the things they could accumulate, and the people that they knew was who they were.
Yeah.
The enemy had gotten them to really buy into that as their identity.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when a man believes those things and any of those things are kind of out of whack, he's maybe not been able to keep up with the Joneses, as we say in America, and accumulate the things that he thinks he should be, or he's not living in the right neighborhood, and he's not running around with the right people, or he's had some failures in his business or his life, maybe his marriage, he's divorced or whatever. If a man believes all those things that are really who he is, then he doesn't fully embrace the role of a man that he's supposed to in his home, his marriage, whatever that may look like. So the statement that as we fast forward to today, that continues to resonate. I did a teaching this morning with some guys, and it was the main point that impacted the guys when we went around and did some comments after the teaching. It was a statement that what I do is not who I am. But who I am has a huge impact on what I do if I really know who I am. And so in the midst of all that, the Lord really just showed me that the number one assignment for Tim Brown was to go about trying to help men deal with what I think is the number one problem with men today, is that men don't know their identity. And
Yeah, just repeat that saying again, because I think that's really important that men that are listening to get that.
when on the surface you hear it, but then when you really go on a journey of getting in God's word and letting him really teach you this, and that statement is, what you do is not who you are, but who you are has a huge impact on what you do if you really know who you are.
Fantastic.
And
Love that.
that's what we've tried to do the last 15 years is go about attacking what I think is the number one problem out there with men today is their identity. Matter of fact, our signature study that we have men do, one of our resources, is called Identity. And then there's a question after it, don't you know who you are?
Yeah.
And I kind of got that visual given to me one time of the Lord standing up there with his arms kind of open, looking down at men, Jesus following men especially, going, hey, don't you know who you are?
Yeah.
You're my beloved. You're redeemed. You're forgiven. You're justified. You're holy. You're no longer condemned. I mean, all these, you're a saint, all these things that we became when Jesus died for us. And he's like, don't you know that? And for that reason, if you know that, then how your life plays out looks totally different. And you become the man you're supposed to be.
Tim, let me ask you then, why do you think that men struggle with that? Why do you think that that is our biggest struggle, to believe that about ourselves, as in, so particularly for a Christian, to align ourselves with what God says about us and who we are in Christ? What do you think are the biggest blockages or challenges with men that we struggle with that?
Well, I think it at our core, when we're born, well, let me back up. Before we knew Jesus, our problem was our identity. What happened in the garden and where we got our identity, because every person that's ever been born was in Adam's gene pool when he sinned. And for that reason, our identity was, we were separated from God. We were a child of wrath, Ephesians 2:3. We had an Adamic nature. The most natural thing for us to do was to sin. I mean, all those, because it's interesting. I ask a lot of men, before you met Jesus, what was your problem? Sin or who you were? Well, 90% of the men will say it was sin. No, it wasn't sin. It was who you were that was causing you to sin. So back there, all the way back there, your identity was the problem. So at the core, everything about us comes from our identity, either before we knew Jesus or after we knew Jesus. The identity deal. So I think at our core as men, it's naturally in us to be thought of a certain way. I think that it's just in our flesh. And I mean, even as a Jesus follower, I find myself at times trying to get my value validated by something in my life going on. Maybe going to speak somewhere, I try to validate that that's who I am. That's my value. So even as a Jesus follower, I still struggle with that.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. So I just think it's a natural part of our lives to struggle with that. And then the fact that the enemy has not had an original ideal since the garden, because the one he did there when he got Adam and Eve to doubt who they were, which caused them to sin, he's pretty much been doing that ever since then because it works. And so I think as we've gotten further and further away from the fall and we become a more broken world, it's just that natural part of us in the flesh that we struggle with, of we've got to get our value from something.
Yeah, something solid.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Maybe it's a drug, maybe it's some kind of addiction. I don't know, but at our core, we have to get validated somehow who we are. It's just at our core. And so I don't think that'll ever go away as long as we live in a broken world, and until we stand before Jesus someday.
For us as men and men who have a faith, I mean, that's a core of who we are. We're getting really foundational here. And let's be honest, if that core is not good, if our foundation of our identity of who we are is skewed, or we're not walking it out fully, then, it does impact and affect every area of our lives, right? And you're seeing this with the guys.
Yeah. I describe it this way, is without the identity piece, it's kind of like you being in quicksand, your head's above the surface, and you're doing all this stuff underneath the surface, moving activity, but you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And you're going to stay right there. And so we think the identity piece is such a foundational cornerstone for everything. And that's where it all starts. And I mean, scripturally, we just see that over and over and over. I mean, what was the first thing Satan did when Jesus was at his weakest point in the wilderness? He said, if you are the Son of God. He tried to get even Jesus to question his own identity. And that's why when we read the Luke account in Luke 3, when Jesus walks onto the pages of history as an adult at the Jordan River, and he goes down and is baptized and comes out of the water, and the sky opens up and the Lord speaks where everybody can hear it. And he says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And then the very next thing in chronological order, because Luke wrote in chronological order, very next thing was Jesus is tempted with the thing that
Yes.
the enemy's all tried to do is, if you are the Son of God. So God shows us right there that the identity piece is the foundational core thing, because he knows that is the enemy's number one ploy, always has been, always will be, to get us to doubt our identity.
So would you say, Tim, that I mean, so many men in the unchurched world, but also in the church world, who see other things as a priority? So it could be their family, it could be their job, their career, you know, like you said, their home, their boat, their car, whatever it is they have. That's where they build their identity, right? And that's why men are so unable to serve the Lord the way they should, because their total focus is on the wrong things.
Yeah, well, there's a saying in a book that I loved that I bought another dozen copies of it today because I hand it out to lots of young men as much as I can. The name of the book's called The True Measure of a Man. It's a real simple book to read. But in there, and I'm not sure if this is the author's original quote, he may have gotten it from somebody else, but I love what he says. He says, men should not fear failure, but what they should fear is spending most of their time trying to be successful at things that don't matter.
Yeah, and that's true.
Wow.
That's what happened. That's what's happened to men is we spend our time on things that don't matter because we believe what we do, what we have, and who we know is who we are.
Yeah.
And for that reason, when we're spending all of our time trying to be successful at things that don't matter because we believe that's where we get our identity, then that leads to another statement that we use at REUP a lot is, because of those two lies and those two activities in our lives, we don't give God time enough so he can teach us enough, so we can learn enough to trust him enough to let him live his life through us.
That's great.
That's why it says the average Christian man spends less than 10 minutes a day in the word and in prayer. And I think that's an inflated number. I don't think we do that. And so how in the world could you learn your identity if you're not spending time with he that gave you your identity? And so one of our number one goals is to help men give God time enough so that he can teach them enough, so they'll learn enough to trust him enough to let him live his life through them and understand their identity. Then they learn their identity, and then they understand that what they do is not who they are, but who they are has a huge impact on what they do if they really know who they are.
Yeah. I'm going to re-listen to this and write these down. These are good.
Yeah, that's right. I can remember, just by the way, in terms of my own life, I remember, and Tim Charles knows this story. I remember sitting in my cruiser that I had. My sports car up in the car park in Sydney, and the lovely home and all the stuff that I had. And I was smoking a cigar, and I had a lovely glass of red wine. And I sat on the back of my boat this Friday afternoon, and I said, is this all there is? There must be more. I've got everything that I want, but I've got nothing.
Yep.
And I didn't give my life to the Lord at that point, but I guess it was a starting point of me starting to think about identity and, you know, who I actually was.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
what you just described, Tim, and what you just described, Des, is the conversations I was having with all these men.
Yeah.
That same conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So in essence, Des, I mean, goes back to what Tim was just saying, right? Which is you spent too much time chasing the wrong thing. You didn't know it was the wrong thing at the time.
Yeah.
So let's bounce off the back of that. So Tim, your identity course, right? I mean, tell us a bit about the course first and foremost, some of the subjects that we look at, and you guys are very big on getting men into small groups, and you know, we're super excited about that at Momentum too, men getting connected, doing life together. So tell us a bit about the course and then the fire teams that can come as a result of.
Well, I'm gonna make a statement first. That's not my statement. It's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tim Elmore, and he says this: that more intentional time with fewer people has a greater kingdom impact.
Wow.
And that's the model Jesus used. You know, he did it with 12. Sometimes it was just with 3 or 4 of them. And those guys turned around and did the same with others, and here we are today. And so because of the identity deal that the Lord made so clear to me, I needed to learn that myself.
Yeah.
So I went about trying to answer 6 questions that I really felt like I needed to get answered to really hook my wagon to this Jesus thing, but also to really understand that if I could get those 6 questions answered, I might have start to have a little bit of a grasp of who I really am. And so in that journey, as I did that, I wound up writing this study called Identity, Don't You Know Who You Are? And so I went about dealing with 6 questions in there. It's an 18-week study. It's laid out in 6-day formats, because what we learned was if we could give men an intentional structure that they could get in, read the word every day, think. Doesn't do any good to read the word if you're not going to think. Think. So we tell them what to read, and then we give them 3 or 4 questions to answer. We don't have an answer key in the back of the book. It's what the Lord reveals to them. And then they get to share their thoughts. And they do that for 6 continuous days. And some guys, it takes them 20 minutes. Some guys, I got a phone call recently from a guy on a Saturday morning. He said, Tim, I just spent 2.5 hours in the Word on week 3 of this study.
Wow.
I've never spent 2.5 hours cumulatively in the Word. And he was so excited and what the Lord revealed to him. So we're finding that if we give men that structure and get them in the Word, then the Word does exactly what it says. It becomes living and breathing, and it starts to transform them and change them.
Yeah.
And they get a passion for it, not for knowledge, but they get a hunger and a passion for it to transform them. And so these 6 questions were, the first one was, I wanted to know what is God's plan really? And how do I fit into that? I mean, what is his plan really? And then the second question I wanted to know, okay, here's his plan, but apparently there's this enemy out here trying to destroy that plan. So I want to know who is Satan, and I want to know as much about him as I can. Now, Jesus is the focus, but what I learned, I'm an old football player, the kind of football we play over here, not with a round ball, but with a football. And I played quarterback, and we used to study film of our opponent so we could learn how they were going to attack us each game. Well, I took that same principle and applied it to Satan and said, okay, that's the guy that's trying to disrupt my life. I want to know much about him as I can. Well, what's interesting is the number of men that have been in church their whole life that do this study, and we spend 3 weeks on Satan, and they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. I never knew any of this stuff about Satan. Now it makes more sense. Now I kind of understand how he comes at me and why he does it and all that. And so then after that, I thought, okay, now I got God's plan. Who is this enemy, this Satan? So now I want to know what happened in that garden and how did it affect me personally? Not that I didn't care about anybody else, but I want to know what happened to me. Well, apparently in that garden, I got something I didn't sign up for. I didn't sign up to be separated from God. I didn't sign up to have an Adamic nature, be a child of wrath, but that's what I got. But I really wanted to understand that. And then that led me to the next question, which was, okay, now that I know what happened in the garden and I got a problem that I didn't sign up for, how do I get this problem fixed? And that's where the cross comes in. And we do a real detailed study of the cross there, really understanding what 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, where it says, he who knew no sin became sin on our behalf so that we might become the righteousness of God. I really wanted to understand what that means when it said he became sin, and what's that really look like, and how did that play out? And then after I learned how my problem got fixed, and apparently I became this new creation, this new person, I wanted to know who that guy was, because I still looked the same in the mirror, but I wanted to know what really happened to me and who did I really become? And is it something I got to earn? Is it something I got to wait on until I get to heaven? Or is it something I get now? Is my identity something I can live in now?
Oh.
Then when I got that question answered, I'm like, but now wait a minute. I'm this new creation. I've got the mind of Christ, all this stuff, but I still have this battle going on, because as Paul writes in Romans 7, I still do some of the very things I don't want to do, which is sin. And so what's going on? Did my card really not take or something, or am I not saved? So I really wanted to know about this battle and understand it. And I tell you, the last 2 questions there of really who I became and what's going on in this battle, that's when the light bulb really starts to go off, and victory and the authority starts to really come in. And then I learn how to live in that. And it's wow. And then I learned it's him doing it through me.
Of course.
While
So Tim, can I just ask then? I mean, those questions are are fantastic, by the way. And we encourage you to check out the identity course on the REUP website, which you can access through momentumaustralia.org. But those questions are fantastic. It's a very personal thing, right? Bring in the fire teams for me and tell me about the importance then of having other men alongside you as you're walking that really personal journey out yourself,
So
but having the other guys around you to support and encourage you as you do that.
Well, the goal here, period, has to be to grow each individual man's relationship with the Lord. That's what everything's about. I mean, that's the deal. That's what the Lord wants more than anything else, is he wants us to grow our personal relationship with him. That's why he saved us, to be in relationship with him. And so when the guys do that, yeah, it's personal, but they need a setting then that they come to, and we do it weekly. Our fire teams meet weekly. It's 6 to 8 guys. A fire team is a military term for men in a foxhole fighting a battle, taking fire from an enemy who's trying to destroy them, which is that's a man's life every day. That's what he lives in every day. So they come together with their fire team once a week. We have an accountability structure that they use to kind of start having accountability in their life. They develop these unbelievable friendships, but it's so important that they have this context to talk about what the Lord is revealing to them as they're spending their personal time with him. And what's really interesting is we've seen in these fire teams that, let's say you and Des are in the same team, and whatever question you're dealing with, you share what the Lord showed you, but then all of a sudden Des shares something that the Lord showed him that you didn't see. Now you hit a home run. You got what the Lord showed you, and then you just got what he showed Des as well. And if you didn't have those men to come to every week, that wouldn't happen.
That's true.
And
that's so true.
And so even in helping, the Lord will use the other men in these groups to help teach you and reveal to you, but you got to be willing to be in that setting and step into it consistently so that can happen. And so, yeah, and then just to be able to talk and say, hey, this is what I think the Lord was revealing to me, and these guys validate it for you or confirm it. That's important too. And yeah, it's just a really cool deal. And the average tenure of our fire teams right now is 9 years.
Wow.
So that tells you that guys love it. They're flourishing. They're growing. Because you know as well as I do, guys don't show up consistently for something unless they're getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, guys will quit. And so what we've learned is, again, if we can just get them in a setting where they're giving God time enough, so he can teach them enough, so they'll learn enough to trust him enough, that then we got them. They're there.
Yeah.
And so that's what the fire team structure does. We provide all the context, we provide all the resources, all the support, the encouragement, coaching, if you want to say it that way. I mean, we almost kind of overkill it, but we know guys have to have that so they'll stay focused.
Yeah. So before we leave this conversation, I'm going to give you a couple of websites and encourage you to write it down. The main website for REUP Men, which is, we've been talking to the founder, Tim Brown, reupmen.com. That's REUP men.com, reupmen.com. That's a direct website. You can access their courses. You can check out a bit more about them. They've got a podcast too. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there that you can access. If you can't remember that, or you want to jot our website down as well, there's a link on our website to reupmen.com at momentumaustralia.org. And of course, you can find out more about what we do and hear this conversation again, and encourage you to have a listen back with a pen and paper and write down some of those sayings, and certainly get in touch with REUP Men and have a look at this identity course, which is what we've been talking about today. It is foundational in your life. And I think we as men, we need this. Once we've got that, that's a good starting point for us. And Des and I are so excited about partnering with REUP Men this year to see men around Australia and the world start to really get to grips with their identity.
Let me add one more link there too, Tim. It's our actually technology platform that we've created that allows you to access all of our resources, all of our studies, how to start a fire team, how to operate a fire team, our podcast, teaching videos, anything you could possibly want. And you can order the studies physically, the workbooks, or you can actually do the studies digitally on this platform and take them anywhere with you anytime. And that is reup.impact, IMPACT.app, reup.impact.app. And that's our technology platform. It's a game changer. We had a guy build it for us a couple of years ago, and it's the future. It's how we're going to engage men all over the world and help them learn their identity.
Okay.
And then we're so excited to lock on with you guys and move forward in this new partnership. And I can't wait to see what the Lord's going to do with that.
Man.
Yeah. So just repeating that for you, reup.impact.app. And of course, we'll have links on our website, momentumaustralia.org. Tim Brown from REUP has been our special guest. Man, we feel like we've just gotten started with you, Tim. There's so much in that, but what a great place to start. And we'll leave it there for this week and encourage guys to check out the websites. Thanks so much for your time, mate. And we're excited to see where this goes. God bless.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching this week's show, and we hope you subscribe to Momentum so you can find out what's happening in the shows in the future.
Absolutely. And keep an eye on our website too. That's momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find all of our shows and a whole heap of resources to help you on your journey. That is momentumaustralia.org.
Until next time, keep moving forward
with Momentum.